Are we gonna do that tonight? No, no, we're talking fantasy tonight, so that's definitely not fucking happening. But it's yeah, it is what it is, folks. You love it regardless. I don't want to hear it. But let me introduce the great guest tonight who's gonna help me with all this. I've been excited to have him on for a couple weeks now since he scheduled an appointment. And folks, I am joined by J.V. Watch me fuck it up. Hilliard, author.
Perfect. No, you didn't fuck it up. We're all good.
Yay! But JV here is the author of the Warminster series, first and foremost, and I believe he's a second series he's working on now as well, but we'll get into all that in a bit. First things first, how you doing tonight, Sarah?
I'm well. Thanks again for having me. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to our chat.
Same, same. So, well, first question I ask everybody in the show is, what made you get into the paranormal supernatural world?
Well, in part, it was my family. We have a history. My grandmother and my mother even my mother and my aunt had a bit of what I would describe as ESP. I don't know how else to describe it. My grandmother was Eastern European, came from, and when I was growing up, I just presumed that a lot of that was superstition, but they were often on the same pages when they shouldn't have been. And there was, I know this term is used derogatorily, but back in the day, my grandmother referred to herself as a gypsy. And it was one of those things that even coming to the States as part of her immigration, something she held on to, and it kind of stuck with my family. And around that, there's always been a level of paranormal. There's
Yep.
been ghost sightings and things like that. It's hard to talk to people about that in the office space, unless your friends or your colleagues are open minded to it. But it's something that's always attached to me. And so when I write fantasy, I don't write it in the traditional Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, Dungeons and Dragons sense. A lot of that is the central piece of it, of course. But I also have a dark spin to it, a gothic spin that allows me to bring in some of those experiences from my family, the history, some of just the tales that they tell, coupled with my interest in everything from the occult to the supernatural to other things, and ghost hunting and fun stuff like that. So, for me, that's how I blended the two because they were my two passions.
Well, there you go. And I mean, since I just watched, literally just watched The Wolfman last night, the original Universal one. So
Oh, that's
I
cool.
gypsies are in the mind right now to begin with. So and I don't know why there's such a hate on that word. I mean, Romanian is the correct term nowadays, but I mean, or not Romanian. Fuck, it's gonna slip my mind, but starts with R. I'm pretty sure. Romani. Yeah, duh. Romani. It's a correct term for that nowadays, but I don't know. To me, I would be proud to be one, honestly. I mean, they were the most entertaining folks for hundreds of years. They weren't the boring regular peasants that everybody else was. They got to do things that nobody else gets to experience, and they had abilities that no one else can, that most people can't talk about. So I don't know why there's hate behind it. I really don't. I mean, I guess some of them don't want to be called that. I guess it was used as a derogatory term to some degree, like a lot of words, but I don't know. You got to rise above things, in my opinion. But that's me.
Yeah, I think that, in part, the stigma of them kind of being a road show. I mean, there was the part of it that was romantic, right? It was the part that was bardic, and they would come to your town, and you would, they would entertain you. But some of that, there was an underbelly and a black market for things like prostitution and gambling and things that would, turn
Be,
people against them. Just something
be
things
frowned
would
upon
happen.
by
It would
society.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they would blame them for it. But ultimately, I think in the end, you're right. I mean, in my experience with my family, and only part of my family, only my grandmother on my mother's side, and what I've seen of it, she embraced the term. It was almost like she didn't mind being migratory. Like her home was on the road, she didn't mind coming and following my German grandfather to the States, because that's what it was all about. She was going to see the world, right? And it was there's a bohemian aspect to it that I think is pretty cool too, and a lot of what their I think their cultural history was preserved in storytelling. So for me, and in particular my uncle before me, to be storytellers, and I developed into a writer, it doesn't surprise me because it's in the blood in some respects.
Of course, I mean it should be, and I mean I don't know. I mean I think I would love that life, like that life of just traveling all the time, and I think it'd be something I would truly enjoy in life. It's not. I don't. I mean, it seems more interesting than I mean, yes, you don't have the stability and security of staying in one home all the time, but you still get to see more of life. You get to just live life more. You experience things throughout the world that no one else would experience because they don't happen to be there at that moment. It's just, I don't know. To me, there's, like you said, there's a romanticism to it. There's a certain mysticism to the lifestyle, and it's funny because my previous co-host of my other show, he comes from a circus family, and there was always, and I also have another co-host on another paranormal show I do that comes from a carny background. So there was always a big argument between two of them about carnies versus circus people. But it,
Hey, it's a lifestyle, man, and if you're born into it, I guess that's your normal, so it's okay.
yeah, apparently carnies are dirty according to circus people, but we won't get into that.
Yeah, I don't
I
know,
mean,
no experience.
I, I'm a I'm a juggalo, so I run with the carnies. I don't mind it.
There
But
you go.
so let's get into this because I obviously, folks, I did not have a chance to read his books. He has like five of them, so I did not have a chance to read these books in a couple weeks before this. As you all know, newborn life, me ain't no time to do nothing. I barely had time to watch movies for this damn show like I'm supposed to. But I do. They are now definitely on the top of my books guests have written that I want to read list, which is very long, but they're at the top because I love a good fantasy series, and from what I did read upon them, they seem very intrinsic and very world expanding. So I definitely want to check them out. They seems like, and there's a game to go with them. Did I see that right?
Yeah, I'm in the process of working with one group that's raising funds to make it a video game, and then in 2026, the graphic novel adaptation of the Warminster saga comes out. So 18, 24 months from now, as the second series of the Warminster saga launches, it'll launch alongside a graphic novel adaptation of the first series, which I think will be really cool. And it's been fun to kind of storyboard that and sit on the sideline while I watch real masters at work, taking my stuff and making it graphically pleasing and illustrating it, and then boiling down my epic fantasy 500-page, 150,000 word books into 6 words on in one bubble somewhere. It's a lot of fun seeing that happen too, and being part of that process has been fun. So yeah, there's a lot of momentum on it, and I've enjoyed the process and frankly the journey getting from point A to point B so far.
I mean, it sounds epic, and I mean, well, as a gamer, I gotta ask, what kind of video game are you trying to make? Is it going to be like a computer
Yeah,
game or like a console game?
it will be an augmented reality and virtual reality game. The
Oh,
company
nice.
that I'm working with is called Milderverse, and they've teamed with Niantic, which is the folks that make Pokemon Go. And the concept would be the first stage of the game will come out as AR. The second stage of the game will come out as VR, and that's a little bit farther down the road. And that's really where the big money raise is right now. The focus and where they're in the process of moving forward is developing that AR. But for the most part, the game will allow you to play within the confines and the guardrails that I'm helping them set up. That's related to the plot in the first 4 novels, so that they have they can do things different than what happens in the game, but they could also play the same storyline, and they could pick a character to be like, they could pick a character to align with, and they can also pick characters that they could do some they could side with the villain if they wanted to. It gives them a lot of latitude
Ooh,
to do what
who
they
do,
want to do.
who doesn't love a game
Right?
where you get to go to the dark side? Come on now.
That's exactly right. Yeah, yeah. So a lot of that stuff, I obviously it's still in development and they're still in a fundraising mode, so it's nowhere near being completed. But the graphic novel's coming.
Oh,
I've got cells of that. That's a lot of fun to take a look at. I put them on my tables at my conventions and book signings so that people can see what some of these artists have already done and the adaptation of some of the characters. I swear to God, they're like police sketch artists. They read the book and then all of a sudden it's like, does this character look like this? And they hold up something and you're like, oh, that's so good. Like that's almost tap dead center. And that's a lot of fun too. It's also nice to see your characters come to life through someone else's eyes. I think
oh
that's
God,
why
yeah.
reading a book is all so much better than. I mean, I'm a movie buff. I love movies. Don't get me wrong, but ultimately, when you read a book, all the characters are perfectly cast because they're in your head, and then sometimes in a movie, actors or actresses that get cast into certain parts might not match what you thought they were
No, I
or
mean
should be.
and plus Hollywood likes to ruin everything and put actors in it just because they're the big name right now when they're really not meant for that role. Which
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just the way it goes. Just the way it goes, unfortunately. But I am looking at you, DC. I really am. But I I'm not naming names, but yeah, I'm looking at DC. But I don't know. I mean, it's just well. Let's start at the beginning. What in well, okay. What were your inspirations that made you want to write a fantasy not like a fantasy series? Like what were the big fantasy novels that like got you hooked on that genre?
Oh, when I was in the fourth grade, I had read to me in my English class The Hobbit and part of the Lord of the Rings, and as a result of that, I was immediately hooked. And then that Christmas, I asked my uncle, who was like a second father to me, for a Dungeons and Dragons set, and we started playing Dungeons and Dragons when I was 10. And he was a Marine. He was paralyzed in the war, so he was very limited in what he could do. And one of the things he did was write. And so, for me, following in his footsteps and seeing what he would do, he wrote horror novels and mostly short stories that would appear in like Pulp Fiction and in magazines and things of the day. But ultimately, because of his condition, he was limited in what he can do. And Dungeons and Dragons was a lot of escapism for him, and writing was escapism for him. And I grew up emulating that. I wanted to be that. So I think it was a combination of that early experience with the granddaddy of them all and Tolkien, coupled with
Hmm.
my uncle's desire to be a writer and showing me how he was escaping his form, allowing me to do some of those same things without those ailments. And I think those are the two things that inspired me. But Tolkien was the top, and then a bunch of those Dungeons and Dragons writers. So like Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman on all of the Dragonlance stuff, coupled with like R.A. Salvatore and the Dark Elf series, and things like that. And I think I fell in love with that. And those series are so long. I would read. I mean, you today there's still new Dragonlance, and today there's new Dritz Do'Urden books that come out. And it just I'm a sucker. I buy them all and read them all. So, for me, I'm following in those footsteps, but Tolkien was really the gateway.
See, I never got into Dungeons and Dragons. I always knew it existed from a certain age. I just never knew anybody that played it, never knew anybody that got into it. So it was just never like a thing that came into my wheelhouse. I in my later life now, I kind of like shit. I probably should have known kids that were into it because it was probably something I would have freaking loved and not didn't realize at the time. I mean, I don't think I ever remember one kid when I was younger saying, "Oh, we played Dungeons and Dragons tonight." Like I don't think I ever heard that any kid say that in my area. Like it just wasn't a thing. I don't know why. I mean, Lord of the Rings, I got into when the movies came out. I knew of it beforehand slightly, but I never read the books. It's just I think my uncle had them. I think I tried reading one time, and I was a reader, and even those books were like just like damn, like that's daunting. That's daunting. I mean,
Yeah.
Tolkien
Well,
did
I
his.
will say this. I mean, from your perspective, the Dungeons and Dragons stuff is now online. You could find a
Oh yeah,
group and you could be a novice player and just do it. You don't have to worry about kids on the street. Now, I got lucky in the sense that a lot of my friends were nerds, right? So we all wanted to play, and it was easy to find other players. And we, in some cases, had a big enough group that we would break into two groups, and then we would combine the groups at certain stages for plot lines and stuff like that when we were, high school through college in a lot of respects.
yeah.
And there's a core group of us that still play Sunday nights 6 to 10, but because we're all scattered around the country now and have families and kids and jobs and travel and all that kind of stuff that goes along with it, we do it on Zoom, and
Yeah, of course.
and make it work, and take turns dungeon mastering.
I mean, see, as I said earlier, newborn life. I don't have time for the video games I fucking play. I paid to play. So I mean,
Uh-uh.
I
Uh-uh. Yeah.
yeah,
I
and
feel your pain, brother. I feel your pain.
I co-host four podcasts technically. So host one and co-host three. So I mean, that's my leisure time. If I try to do anything else, the wife's gonna kill me. So it's
Understood. Understood. Yeah. Okay,
it's
family
but
first,
yeah,
man. I get it.
yeah, it's. I mean, I don't know. I mean, when I was a teenager, the fantasy series that really got me were like the Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. It,
Oh,
the so,
sure.
yeah, I mean that was the one that really got me into fantasy heavy. Like I freaking loved his writing. It wasn't overly wordy, but it was like not kid made for kids, so it's like kind of in between. I wouldn't even say it's young adult; it's made for adults. But that, and then I mean, all my vampire werewolf books and shit like that. But I mean, that was my introduction to fantasy, and of course, video games. But so I so you when did you actually start writing the books? Like what year? What year?
It was COVID. Prior to that, I was a defense lobbyist, and so I spent 20 years in Washington D.C. working with technology companies and accessing the Pentagon and the White House and Congress prior to that. And when the COVID happened, my industry was shut down for almost a year and a half, and then with the advent and the expansion of things like StreamYard and Zoom and Skype, there was no need for me to go back in the sense I could do a lot of that stuff remotely. And I live in Pittsburgh, so for me to be traveling to DC 3 or 4 days a week, that ended. And when COVID had happened, the silver lining in it for me was I had a chance to do something I've always wanted to do, which was write that first novel, which I thought was going to be a standalone piece and a bucket list thing. And then when it got published, it was evident at the time when my publisher said to me, "This is great, but we don't publish, standalone fantasy novels because people love the world building aspect of what you build, and you just don't end it with one. So we want a series, which was supposed to be a trilogy, which ended up being a quadrilogy, and now it's a second series beyond that, and some standalone things, and obviously, the game and the graphic novel. It's kind of taken on a life of its own, and it's sort of my next career, right? It's the playing my back nine, doing this stuff, which is a lot different than what I did in the first 20 years of my career. This thing is a lot more fun and it's friendly, and the people in the industry are all there trying to help you as opposed to tear you down or make you miss. Right here, everyone, even if they can't help you, they try to help you. And so for me, it's a nice way to end a career and something I hope to retire into. As the popularity of my stuff continues to grow. So at least that's where I'm going with it. So fingers crossed, see if I can get there.
That's yeah. I mean, it's to be able to do that. It's amazing. I mean, before I went hiatus for a couple months to deal with the newborn, I basically kept telling people on the show, like I even had like a psychic tell me like it's that I will be writing a book in the next 5 years, and I'm like, you
Right.
sure about that? I'm like, are you sure about that? Because
Yeah.
I've had ideas. I mean, it's gonna be not it's not gonna be fiction, and I know that it's gonna be kind of a worldview book on the paranormal world. But that's the only thing I really narrowed down so far. But uh, I think the title of it might even be like shit. Like literally, I might just name it shit. But it's I don't know. I've been told so many times I'm going to do it. I'm just like, okay, I guess I kind of am getting forced into it at this point. So maybe in a couple years when the baby's not a baby anymore, then I can start taking time to do things like this. So we'll see. I mean, I don't know. I got things people need to hear. So let's fucking do it. And I've talked
Yeah,
to certain
man.
people
Take
on these.
take notes and just store away. I built my world over 20 years of Dungeons and Dragons play, memorializing that play, coupled with ideas I've had for stories my entire life. And you never know. So don't let those ideas die. Take them, stick them in your cloud somewhere, and find a way
Well,
to turn that on whenever you're ready.
see, that's the great thing. This is my ideas. I have 60 something episodes of people tell me their beliefs in the paranormal and shaping my theories of it. And it's all available on YouTube, so I can go back and rewatch it anytime I please to get ideas of what I need to say next. So it's
Very
it'd
good.
be don't
Very
it'd
good.
be daunt it'll be daunting to have to watch it all again for damn sure, but it's a lot of hours.
But
But
you'll
I
know
mean,
which ones really are battle tested, right? You'll know the ones you
yeah,
want to go back to. The
I'll know
ones that are memorable, that appeal to
yeah.
you, that's the ones you go back and watch.
I will 100% know the ones that people actually told me something that I was like, had my jaw dropped, and I was like, okay, this is going in a book. But and plus, I need to be able to reference people too, so that's always a good thing. But and that's a great thing. I have links to all their pages on every episode, so I know where to find them and where to reference them too. So yay! But
Yeah, good.
I mean, it'll all come together eventually. I think. I don't know. There's life's in a lot of stuff's in transition right now in my life, and once it all settles down a couple years, maybe, but we'll see. Time will tell, folks. You might see my beautiful face in the back of a book eventually, but until then, JV, what why don't you tell us a little summary of your series? I mean, obviously it's a huge world. And I know you can't go. We'll be here for 5 hours if I actually explain all of it, but just like a little
Right.
summary of what it's about.
Yeah, sure. So it's a mix between a typical struggle, which is a trope that you might find in other books, which is, what I would describe as sort of, the false prophet meets the chosen one, uh, mixed with a bit of a hero's journey. And so, the books really start out with Damus. He's a young prophet. He's able to see the future, and he sees it when he sleeps through the power of honoramency. And he, of his sect, is the only one that's able to see the return of something called the Fallen Keeper, or Grey Taurus the Mad, who was of his sect, that used a very similar power in the past for his own gain, and his god punished him for that by taking not only his metaphysical sight but also his physical sight and blinding him. And this blinded, mad seer is coming back to take revenge, and Damus is the only one that's able to see him coming back in his dreams, and hence the name, the Last Keeper. He's the last one to see his return, and that's really what launches the first four-book series. It's Damus's struggle against Great Taurus, and you get to see a very Luke Skywalker-ish, a very Harry Potter-ish hero's journey, where this young man in his early 20s, who's been sheltered his entire life, has to go on the road and put together, a band of men for a harrowing adventure to stop this from happening. And in there somewhere, there's a romance, there's a fantasy romance, or romantasy as it's called these days, between, a lowborn border knight who's fallen in love with a highborn princess, but they're not allowed to consort because, one, he's of low noble birth, but he's also of mixed blood, and it's, do the two of them find a way to, you know uh, consummate the deal, versus walking away from it. In his case, from a duty perspective; from her case, from all the social mores that are pushing her away from him. But it's his deeds in the battlefield, and it's his deeds that are noble, his gallantry, that she sees in him and starts to fall for him, even though she's not supposed to. And so it's the combining of those two storylines over the four-book series that really kind of, I think, is, garnered the popularity of the Warminster Saga, based on,
I,
I think,
yeah,
familiarity of things that people see as part of that. So
and just like that, you sold me because you named my two favorite IPs in the world, Star Wars and Harry Potter. So yeah.
there you go, there you go. Yeah,
uh, and I was gonna say from the beginning, it was sounding very Harry Potter Voldemortish, like it really was, like the whole returning villain, and only one person believes he's coming back, and that right there, that part sounds like Harry Potter esque. But I mean, that's a trope that's been used in fantasy for centuries.
oh,
So
since the
yeah, I
beginning,
mean,
right? It's
yeah,
Sauron and Bilbo, and Sauron and Frodo, and you can go down the list of things,
yeah,
and it's there. It's like the return to the, especially in epic fantasy, you get this big bad evil guy,
yeah,
and you usually get people that are unexpecting, or in some cases unwilling heroes, that need to step up. And in Damus's case, he is the definition of an unwilling hero. He doesn't even want his powers of prophecy, and he's tried to
yeah,
get away from them, but they are too powerful for him not to embrace. And
yeah.
it's, can he do that? And then it's building this team of heroes, this D&D party of heroes, to go out and do this. Now, the other side of it is, and I think this is what matches up with your audience really well, is I have really baked into this a lot of the gothic and a lot of the supernatural. So you're not going to see things in here that you might have seen in other um, fantasy books. You're going to see my mix of like a Native American skinwalker meets a doppelganger, to use a very German term, as this Anthrax Bakari, this creature that I've created as part of that, or this mix of the Master of the Hunt, which is this Nordic myth with the Wendigo, sort of
Yep.
like because you mentioned werewolf before, putting those two things together so that you can see the antlered man, who is this almost flawless hunting machine that hunts Damus to kill him on behest at the behest of Great Taurus the Mad, and it's how he not just escapes him, but eventually defeats him, and things like that as part of that. And there's all of these other myths that you'll see as part of it, all some of which are very paranormal esque, and the basis of those, including some of the ghost like creatures and some of the undead creatures, that are
Exactly.
part of the process. So yeah,
See, and that, folks, is why I wanted to get him on, because I knew there had to be some elements of that in it as well. And that he threw a skinwalker into it. And a Wendigo. My God, you hit the golden duo. You really did. For any
yeah,
paranormal lover, those were the two like most mythical, amazing creatures. And I mean, well, skinwalkers are basically a paranormal IP at this point because of Secret Skinwalker Ranch. So it's it's become a huge thing over the last 5 6 years. Before that, you really didn't hear about it too much. I mean, Wendigos, they had to get mentioned in horror movies a little more. I mean, Pet Cemetery and all that. But well, actually, no, they don't really mention those in the movie. They mention them in the fucking book, another Stephen King book ruined by movie makers. But it, the and actually, okay, now I gotta ask this: is there any like Stephen King esque like horror elements to your books, or
not really. It, I don't want to say no because there are you know, tropes that Stephen King uses to scare us all, right? And
yeah, of
so
course,
things like that, the mysterious person that comes to town, and or in the case you mentioned, Pet Cemetery, or the Tommy knockers, or all these kind of strange things that are out there. These kind of created, even that's his own form of creation. I've tried to do the same thing, but by pulling things in that we're familiar with, but giving my own spin. So my skinwalker isn't a true skinwalker.
of
It's
course.
a doppelganger meets a skinwalker, or the antlered man, or in some cases, like, I eventually have an undead dragon. That's part of it. That is
Ooh,
bones, and creatures that's empowered by the big bad evil guy, as part of this. And there's a lot of things in there that I don't think you'll necessarily see in traditional classical fantasy. I want to scare people, and Damus, in all honesty, that Damus is a bit of me cast into it. When I was younger, I mentioned at the top, about my family's history. I started having a recurring nightmare when I was about 16 years old, lasted into my early 20s. And so I cast a lot of those nightmares of me, and of course, it was more contemporary, into this
yeah.
medieval magical named Damus. And in my real life, the dreams that I had this creature come to me, that claimed to be my guardian angel, and I was telling me to do things in my dreams. And when I didn't do them, he sought violence against me, and then he would try to entreat me to do them in other cases by helping me on tests and stuff like that. And these recurring nightmares were not the same nightmare. It was the same character in the nightmare. It would just stop, and then 2 months later, I'd have another nightmare about him, and it would continue where it left off. It was strange. It was almost like I was living it, and it was scary. And and as like a 17-year-old, 6'2", 230-pound hockey player, you should not be afraid of your dreams when you're 18 years old. But these things
Uh,
would I would lose sleep. It'd be freaking me
I
out. And I knew that scared me so much. I wanted to embed that into a character because I knew that other people might have that same experience. And if they haven't seen something through their eyes, Damus was basically me, at least that portion of me cast into this character, and he sees the return of this fallen keeper. And that was that I took my quote unquote guardian angel and cast it into this evil guy named Great Taurus the Mad, because There was nothing guardian about it. It was scary as shit.
I mean, well, a couple things on that. I mean, angels are not all white, glowing white in halos. That's for damn sure. I have a lot of people. I have a lot of people who talk to them who can tell you that much. And two, you ever consider the possibility of it being a extraterrestrial slash ultra terrestrial invading your sleep?
Uh, it was if it was something like that, it felt nothing like that, right? You know, like the dreams you hear about the grays or the semi-conscious states that people are in when they're remembering things or when they get those memories brought back out through hypnosis and things like that. There's always a, like I was taken up into their ship and there's this feeling of weightlessness and there was all this other stuff. This was straight up horror. Like,
Huh?
when the first time I saw him, it was me walking in the woods, coming to this placid lake, standing in the mud, him walking on water through a fog and coming to me, and he was in a like a three-piece suit with a tie and introduced himself and said, "I need you to do these things for me." And I was scared at the fact that it was so real, and those things I still remember what he asked me to this day. I remember a phone number he told me to call that I refused to this day to even look up and call, right? Like, I just it was so scary, like, something inherent in me told me this is bad. Like, it's almost like if you're in a place and a crime's about to happen and you just get that spidey sense. Every time I had this dream, no matter how good it was or how bad it was, and in one dream when I hadn't done what he asked, he kicked the shit out of me, and I woke up feeling that. Now, when I woke up, I was in my bed. My brother and I shared a room. He was like, "Are you okay?" But my brother was a sleepwalker. He was a guy that I could talk into doing sleepwalking stuff at times. But I was never like that. And there were only these dreams that would happen every 3 or 4 months, and he would know that it would put me out of sorts for a day or 2 because it was so real, and there was sort of like a PTSD effect to it, where the next day or 2, I was sluggish about it, and even into college, man, like, I was a man, like, drinking age, voting age, going to war age, and I was still having these things in college, and then they just stopped abruptly. But I don't know if it was that he felt that I was never gonna listen to him, or it was a fake thing, or I just outgrew them, I don't know what it was, but to say it was more extraterrestrial, I just didn't get that vibe from it. I got this almost, uh, I don't wanna use the term possession because that mischaracterizes it, but it was almost a visitation by something that I don't know if there was a ship or a visitor from another planet, that kinda stuff. It was more like this was very terrestrial, and the term guardian angel was used by
Well,
him. So,
I mean, when you use the term possession, it got me thinking. And I'm not the biggest believer in the fact that demons exist or not. I've heard a lot of arguments both ways, so I don't fully have a belief in that they truly exist. There are, however, bad spirits that do exist and have been proven to exist, and that's my thinking. Like a bad spirit would be the first thing to lie to you and say, "I'm a guardian angel," just to fuck with a teenager. So,
right,
I
yeah.
mean, and I mean, you don't have to go into great detail, but like, was it asking you to do like things that are typically called known as bad things, or things that were like good or neutral?
Mostly neutral. They were things that were you need like the one that scared me the most, and this is gonna sound ridiculous because it's nothing scary about it, was he said, "Your future belongs to this telephone number." And he gave me this number, and it was a local number, to me, and he said, "You need to call it, and if you don't call it, bad things are gonna happen. You have to call us, that your life depends on you calling this number." Now, when you say that to an 18-year-old kid who's sleeping and you wake up, there's nothing scary about calling a phone number. And I've had my wife, my friends, my exes, goofballs that have tried to get me to tell them what that number was so they would call it. Because that number technically could still exist, but I'm so scared. I've never Googled it. Back when there was phone books, I never looked it up. I remember it to this day. I remember it like it's seared. It's almost like my social security number seared into my head
See,
because it was so freaking scary. Like I don't even know. And there's nothing scary about that, right? That's pretty neutral. Hey, call
oh,
this
well,
number, you'll benefit from it. And the one time he told
you
me that
don't
he was going to
know.
do me a favor on a physics test and things like that. And the next day I got up, I got 101% on my physics test, and I hadn't even studied for it. Um, and it was like it was there. I got the extra credit right and everything like that. It was like literally I plussed it out, plussed it out, and then when I didn't listen to him, he would beat the shit out of me, like
I mean,
a redheaded stepchild, right? He would just kick the shit out of me in my dream, and I would wake up from the ass whooping, and it was
I mean,
that's the
it,
scary part.
it makes me almost want to believe in demons for a hot second. It really does. And see,
I'm not saying it was a demon. I'm just saying
I
it
know,
was
I know you're not.
whatever it was a scary dream.
I know you're not saying that technically, but like I'm going through my basically Rolodex of paranormal creatures, and I can't really put a name to anything exactly, which is the fucked up part because an unidentified creature visiting your dreams. I mean, and then having the power to physically affect you as well is a whole. There are so many past guests I would love to ask this question to, so they could fucking try to
But it's funny.
rate.
I was on a show where this guy did dream interpretations, and I stumped him too. So you're not the only one to be stumped. Like
Uh,
it was about a year ago, and he asked me all these questions, and at the end, he's like, "I don't know what to tell you because I can't." And that's what he does. He comes on a show, guests come on, and then he interprets their dreams for him. And here he was stumped. He was scratching his head, saying, I don't know what to say here." And of course, he wasn't thinking demonically or UFO-ish or possession, exorcism kind of thing. He was just thinking dream. Okay, this guy's going to tell me that he was wearing a purple robe, and I'll tell him what that means. Instead, it was like, no, no, I have this problem, and but it was one day. It was the end. It was like I 21, 22, whatever it was. I was graduating college, and they just ceased. And to this day, I haven't had a single one of them, but I can remember him. I can remember him punching me and throwing me through a table, like I was some sort of ragdoll wrestler.
what
And I felt that, but I also felt the foreboding of like when he's like, "I'm your guardian angel. You need to call this number," and you're scared shitless to call that number. That's the thing that got to me. Is like what, like my every instinct, every fiber of my being was say, "Do not do that. Do not do that." And I'm still afraid to look it up. I don't want to know because I don't want the dreams to come back.
yeah, I
As stupid
know.
as that is, I don't want to resurrect these things. So it's like, ugh.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I mean, I really don't blame you. I mean, I part of me would want to Google the number because my curiosity would get the best of me on that shit. But 10 to 1 these days, unless it belongs to a business or something, you're not gonna find shit if you Google a number. So, and I mean, who knows? That number could have. I mean, that's what almost makes me want to say demon too, because that number could have been a number that like connected you to like a higher ranking or something like that. Like I don't fucking know. It's just it's
Some people tell
bizarre.
me maybe it was lottery numbers. You should have played the lottery. Other people are like, oh, maybe that would have lived, your one true love, and clearly it wasn't. My wife's number was entirely different, even though it was still local. Um, but I'm telling you, man, if you would have experienced what I experienced,
Uh,
as mundane as that sounds, it is just scary. Imagine if like a werewolf was telling you to call a number. That's how scary this was, and there was just something just diabolical about it, and I couldn't do it. And that was just the one. Like there were other things he would ask me to do too, but you asked for the one, and I've given you the one, and that was the one that we're as dumb as it that doesn't sound. That's about as
it
neutral as it gets. Hey kid,
it
call this number,
I mean,
and
but
I couldn't do it. I still can't do it.
it's not even that dumb because it's just something I never even heard of any. I mean, I've listened to a lot of podcasts that all they have is people's experiences being told. And I've listened to a lot of paranormal stuff in the last 6, 7, 8 years. Never have I heard anything similar to this. So that's what blows my mind is that I've never heard. Usually I can relate to something I've heard in the past at some point. This is an unbeknownst thing to me, and that is insane because that doesn't happen on this show or in my life ever. I always
Well,
can.
read the books because I've memorialized a lot of those experiences in the books, and it's taken me from that initial. I literally the opening scene in book one is exactly that. It's Damus walking lost in this fog who finds this placid lake, and all of a sudden the big bad evil guy shows up and laughs at him. And it was just my experience of what happened to me. And I just and so he has these dreams, and a lot of them happen in there. And I'm telling you, I wish I knew, but it was scary enough that I made it my own series,
Uh-oh.
the heart of my own series.
The
Like, that
ass
was a
the
like
a
a
the asshole in me has to ask, was the number possibly 8675309?
oh, no, it was not, and it was no Jenny was not getting that number. No, and it came straight and the weird you wanna know the weird thing about it? Back in the day when it was delivered to me, it was delivered to me with an area code
Which is
that was
freaky.
local. But we weren't dialing area codes at that time. We were just dialing
Yeah.
8675309, right? Now we have to dial area codes in front of everything, but it was explicitly like, "You need to dial this," and it was a local number, and
I mean I
not going
mean
there.
it, it could have honestly been a number to some cult, some something. Who the fuck knows? Like it could have been a number to some.
Oh,
uh,
I wanna
I
know.
mean, could have been a number
Yeah,
to the fucking
like a Ouija
Freemasons. Who the
board
hell
his
knows?
ass, put him on a Ouija board and go see a psychic. I'm like, "Are you fucking nuts?" Like, I'm not doing that.
There are.
I'm not resurrecting this dude. I'm not doing it.
I mean, there are some doors that shouldn't be open once they close, and that's just the way it is. I mean, I get it. I get it. I part of me would be curious beyond belief, but I probably would be if it happened to me, I probably would be scared shitless and wouldn't. I'd probably be seeing a psychiatrist at fucking 16, like, what the fuck's going on? But like
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, my parents would have probably put me in a fucking psychiatrist's office. I probably would have been like fucking sitting there on the couch watching TV, zoned out all the time, like scared shitless.
Yeah, I didn't
And
tell
not,
my parents until long after. Long after.
I mean, and
'Cause I was afraid of that stuff too. They're gonna send you to the school psychologist, I gotta go see a counselor, and people that,
yeah,
they're
I
gonna,
mean,
"Oh, you're playing" and back in the day, "You're playing Dungeons& Dragons. That's invoking these evil spirits, and are you using a Ouija board too, son?" And da, 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 and it's like, "No, what?" And those who have ever played Dungeons& Dragons realize that you're not invoking shit. It's a
no,
role-playing game. You know what I mean? But, like, the parents back in the day didn't understand that, and all these bad shows and, cults and crazy satanic worshiping stuff
oh,
that was attached to it,
the, the,
I would have been thrown out. It would have literally been
the,
thrown out. So
yeah, I mean,
I didn't tell anybody. I did not tell anybody.
the Satanic Panic in the '90s was one of the stupidest fucking things ever, but it really happened, and it made a lot of kids that didn't need to see therapists. But
Yeah.
oh, you listen to Iron Maiden therapy.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you play it backwards? No. No. It's like, oh,
Uh,
I know. It's horrible. But I did listen to Iron Maiden for what it's worth. Eddie.
yeah, yeah. You seem like the type. You
Yeah.
seem like my type. So yeah, fuck yeah. But Bruce Dickinson for life. But I mean, it's.
Yeah.
I was just working on something Iron Maiden related when I left work today for my other podcast. That's pretty cool. But
There you
synchronicities,
go.
folks.
You just want to manifest
Synchronicities.
it, right? Yeah.
So I gotta ask, do vampires and werewolves come to your book at all? Because I mean, that's a key thing for me, always in fantasy books.
So, werewolves, not entirely. The Wendigo thing that I merged, there's part of that there. The vampire stuff, I honestly am going to write a vampire novel or series when this is over. I didn't use them in this fantasy realm because I had other ideas for that. But I do have one that's more of a contemporary fiction related to modern day vampirism that has a bit of a gothic spin to it called Requiem of Sorrow, which I'm going to launch when I'm done with the second trilogy. It's hard to migrate from one genre to the next. Like if Stephen King were to write a romance novel, it's hard to, you know, the fans to get pulled over there. You almost have to create a new bucket of fans there. And being at the time a novice author, I didn't want to migrate too far away
Well,
from where I was going with these things, and so therefore I'm writing in fantasy for now, but down the road I would definitely want to dip my toe into horror, and that's where vampirism will be.
I mean, I 100% get that. You don't want to go back and forth because then you're going to mix up worlds eventually, and it's not going to be pretty. But it would happen. It happens to everybody. But I will say Stephen King wrote one of the best books on marriage ever, and it was called Misery. But
That's true. That's true.
but yeah, that was his
Well,
romance
he was
novel.
able to dip his toe with like Dark Tower and all these other things, and you
Oh,
can mix those things up pretty well. I just need to establish myself as an author in a
I,
lane,
mm,
and then if I want to
I
deviate from that, I can do that. But I'm not there yet.
that,
That's
that's
a 2027 project.
that's funny. That's funny you mentioned that because before I moved in with my wife and her kids, and I ran out of time to read. Actually, I used the Stephen King book. I'm still on for the last 3 years. I left off on is Dark Tower book too.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
So it's which I mean, of course he did. He's a fucking master, and if he, why wouldn't he take his a lot of his horror characters that are famous and put them in a freaking like multiverse setting? Like it's freaking genius before his time. Like it's
Perfect.
before he's ahead of
Perfect.
his time with that shit 100%. But because multiverses weren't even really a thing besides Universal Monsters, which is probably where he got the idea. But I mean, and people didn't even like really know the word multiverse yet to like put that Universal Monsters. It was just like a world where all these creatures actually exist and sometimes work together for reasons. But which I didn't get to those movies yet. I'm still on all the fucking introductory movies and sequels. So I mean, I like to do things in chronological order. I don't like to jump the fuck around. It's how I am. But that's why I can't jump ahead of Stephen King books to the ones I want to read like really bad because I have to read them in order because I know eventually they cross over in certain places. But so Deimos, though, I gotta ask. I obviously haven't read the book, so I can't picture it. But who, if they gave you choice, if they were doing a movie of the first book and they said, "Who do you want to play Deimos?" What would be your number one choice?
Wow. That's a tough one because he's a young enough character, but he's also relatively unathletic, uninspiring when the books start.
John Hilliard,
He
buddy.
Yeah, he becomes he has to mature quickly, but he's almost like the antithesis of a hero. Like he's this unwilling hero that gets dragged through it by everyone else who's trying to save him, and then he gets sick of seeing people around him die trying to save him, and he sees himself as worthless, right? And I think the kid that I would maybe cast in that role now, and I don't know his name, was the kid that played in It, and also recently played in there was like a heavy metal movie. Ah,
Oh,
God, I
the
wish
main
I could
kid.
remember his name. Yeah, yeah,
Oh, I
uh,
know Zach. What the fuck's his
yeah,
name? I know it. I know
yeah.
his name.
Machinery of Torment. Yeah, I forget the name of the damn. It was a Metal Lords, I think is what it was called. That kid, because he's kind of skinny,
J,
but he's
J,
growing into his own. Go ahead.
Jaden Lieberher. That Lieberher, yeah.
That
Jaden Lieberher.
yeah,
That's his name.
that guy.
What a
Only
fucking
because
name.
I think it fits the bill, right? So, like, you don't
Yeah.
expect him to be this hero that's out on the world, destroying and escaping these monsters and these horrible terrors that have been sent after him. And he continues to win. Um, and Davis gets better as the books go along. He finds
Of
his
course.
footing, but there's a coming of age story that's there too as part of it. So I think he's the perfect type. I don't, obviously by the time if they were ever to make a movie, he's going to be way too old to play that part. But
Well,
they would have to find the next guy like that
yeah,
because
I'm
it's
sure.
not. I don't want it to be like some handsome kid, that oh well, my God, all the girls are going to like because it's not like that. Oh, this is a kid that's he's kind of skinny and endomorphic, and he doesn't. He's xenophobic, and his powers get in his way, and and so he only has a few friends, and people don't really like him and so he's kind of this outcast character, and I think that's the kind of kid that I would like to have playing. And when I say kid, well, you're talking about a young adult, really. You're talking about someone that's like 16, 17 years old.
Oh yeah. I mean, and
So,
plus it's
yeah,
Hollywood, so they cast a 25-year-old anyway. But
right, exactly. But I
that's
think
the
he'd
way it
be the
goes.
perfect fit for it.
All right. Well, actually, this question I just thought of is I actually really like this question, so I got to ask it. If there's any other IP that your IP could cross over with and have like a book between like with the two combined written, like how Dark Tower crossed over with Wizard of Oz for a hot second, like what what IP would you want your books to cross over with?
I would love it to cross over with Dungeons and Dragons, and kind of be I know this will fall on deaf ears because you've never played, but they had a real gothic series called Ravenloft,
I've heard
which
of it.
ha features vampires and werewolves. It basically takes all of the stuff that I love and puts it in a D&D setting. And if I were to take my books and cast them into a setting, it would be very Ravenloft-ish, where it's dark and there's this demon fog that once you find your way into it, you can never escape, and it takes you this faraway land, very Wizards of Ozish, where you just disappear and you have to escape. You have to find your way out, or you're never going to, and you get trapped in these certain places because of this fog that's only controlled by those lords, those evil lords that control those different areas and things like that. And I think that would be perfect to transition because my books are written in a way that D&D players love the battle scenes. They like the pacing. It's a lot like playing the game. While I'm also not allowed to use any of that stuff right now, right? So I can't
Obviously,
call
yeah.
it something or cast it into Forgotten Realms or cast it into Greyhawk or any of the worlds that they've created, even Ravenloft. So I walk up, right up to the line and stop.
Mm,
But I would love to make it a role playing game and
mm.
and then create an entire world out of the realm of Warminster and let people play the game and then mix in that gothic with it.
I was gonna say I would the way it sounds and the map I looked at. I'm immediately my first thing came to my head was I want to see like a Dragon Age esque Skyrim esque game to this.
Oh, Skyrim, yeah, that would be just freaking awesome, right? And there's, I don't overuse dragon lore, but there's enough in it, and in books,
Eh,
end of book 3, beginning of book 4, it just
I
takes off. And
my
go ahead.
son can't hear me say this, thank God, but I am not the biggest fan of dragons. I don't think they're real. They exist. They've been seen in mines in Pennsylvania, just so people know. But I don't think they're not the huge medieval ones we picture when we think dragons. They're not Harry Potter dragons by any means. They're
Right,
smaller. The Chinese and Japanese may have had it right when they said they were snake-like more than these big winged creatures. But I mean, dragons do exist. That's first and foremost. But I've heard it from an expert who has been doing paranormal shows for 20 plus years. So if he tells me something, I fucking believe it. And I mean, I'm not a huge fan of dragons. I like original creatures. Like yes, you can take like you did. Like take combinations of creatures that exist and
yeah.
merge them and make original creatures out of it. Because I mean, there's only so many elements, so many powers out there, so many move sets. Like there's a limit to creativity at some point. Like for certain creatures, like you can't just you're not gonna think of something new every day. Like it's just not the way it works. Like you have to use what's out there and make it your own. But so yeah, I mean, I mean, fuck. I'll play Dragon Age or Skyrim if they didn't have dragons. I don't care. None of the Dragon Ages had a real dragon battles them until the Inquisition, for God's sake. So it's not even like a thing. But I still haven't played the new one. I'm pissed about that. But kids, what are you gonna do? I gotta beat the zombie game first, and I'll play that one. But so yeah, I mean, I mean, it fucking sounds amazing. I would love to see it turn into so much. I gotta add to my freaking read list, and when I get time to read, actually, I will be definitely checking them out. That's right up my alley. Right up my alley. I mean,
Okay.
I love a I love a hero who's not supposed to be a hero. It's always the best thing. I tried watching The Witcher, and it kind of pissed me off. But it's like, look at this dude. They should have cast someone besides Henry Cavill because he looks like a fucking hero from the get go. Like it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has his demons like everybody does, but he looks like a fucking hero to begin with. Like they should have cast some nerdy ass kid.
Yeah, see,
But
and well, in my case, that's exactly what I want. I want that nerdy ass kid cast because that's who the main character is. And there's some heroes in here that are a little bit
no,
more Witcher-esque, but then ultimately I get what you're saying, and I like the idea that heroes have flaws, especially in my villain, Great Taurus. I mean, when you find out his backstory, you find he wasn't born evil, right? He made some choices, and if we were in the same position he was in, you might have made the same choices he did, right? And so when he fell, there's a path to redemption, and it's not offered up to him, but if he paid attention to it, there was a way back, but he chose a different direction, right? And so there's that part of this too, which I think makes it more believable, where these characters are not without flaw. Like it's a good thing that they are flawed because it makes them more realistic and believable in my eyes.
It does. I mean, it makes it more relatable as a human being that if the characters have flaws, you can't like one of my favorite book series. Well, one of my well, there's only two books so far, but and the second one hasn't even been released yet. I just got a beta copy of it because she was the first guest on my show ever. But
Oh, that's cool.
yeah, Brandy Alexander writes the first book is called Genesis. I'm sorry, Brandy, I'm forgetting the name of the second book off the top of my head, but they are just look at Brandy Alexander books, you'll find them. But I mean, they're fucking. It's more of a religious story. It's about a psychic who it's about well, a medium, psychic medium who basically learns that angels and demons exist and that the Bible is 100% realistic, and he basically has to stop the apocalypse. And it's not done in a cheesy or corny way. It's written very well. I mean, if anything, it's a little too Christian-y for me, but that's me. I mean, it almost made me believe in religion again for a hot second. So it's well written. It's fucking well written, and the it's a page turner. Like I literally read the second book in a month on my lunch break at work. Like I would be late going into lunch from lunch every day that I was reading it because I didn't want to stop fucking reading until I got done that chapter I was on. And then it'd be the next chapter and be like, oh, one more chapter will hurt. And it's like it's a page turner. That's the kind of book it is, and they're both amazing. I have she let me read the second one's beta, and she'll be on the show again, folks. Yeah, Brandy Alexander's returning after 2.5 years. But she'll be on again once her second book is releasing. Actually, she's been doing a lot of editing on it, and her publisher's a pain in the ass apparently. But it's she definitely like I can't wait to see her third book when I get to beta read it because it's freaking. I'm still pissed the second book hasn't even come out yet because I even told my wife when I first read the first book to have her on the show. I'm like, I want you to read these books. They are so damn good. Like, I mean, it's just I always have to whenever I have an author on, I have to push her a little bit because it's just fucking. I feel like everybody should read her books. They're fucking beyond belief, well written. And you wouldn't. I mean, and I don't know. I just when I was reading the first one, I didn't know what to think, and I was like, by the time I got to the end of it, I was like, oh my god, that's such a good book. So Brandy's still waiting for my signed copies. Just saying, but because you got to have those. But yeah, I mean, folks, the Warminster series, go check it out. It looks awesome. I mean, for those listening to this podcast, whenever it releases in I don't know months, so it's gonna be months, but I don't know how many. But when this releases, go to his website and look at his freaking world. Like, oh my god, it got me intrigued just looking at that website because I could see it's right up there with like a Lord of the Rings scale map and shit. So it's fucking epic. It's epic, and I can't wait to read it. Honestly, it's not gonna be years probably, but I can't wait to read it. So it's definitely on my list, and I definitely will be checking it out at some point. Maybe I'll ask for Christmas this year. Who knows? But why don't you tell them, JV, where they can find you, everything you do, where they can find your books. Just promote yourself to the fullest.
Yeah, sure. So you could find my stuff at jvhilliard.com. That's HILLIARD. .com. You can also buy my books pretty much anywhere they're available. If you want to go to my publisher at dragonmoonpress.com, you can find them there. If you're an Amazon shopper, you can buy them there. If you want to go into a Barnes and Noble, you can get them there or order them there. If you like audiobooks, they're available on a dozen different platforms for audio downloads. And of course, ebooks are available as well. And I'm easy to find. If you want to direct message me, my all of my handles on all of my social media are at JV Hilliard Books. Go ahead and follow me there and send me a direct message. Happy to answer any questions you have about the series or what's coming next. Or, you can, motherfuck me if you don't like the way things happen or how certain characters then end. Happy to chat with you about those too. But really appreciate you having me on the show and granting me the opportunity to come in front of your followers and chat a little bit about the Warminster Saga. So thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure, man. I am always down. I love authors. I've been reading books since I started reading at a young age, and I've been reading books way more advanced than my skills for the first 20 years of my life. So I love a good book, and even though I can't read as much as I'd like to anymore or at all, I still love a good book, and I will always support authors. So it's always a pleasure to have one on, and especially one that does fantasy. That's just right up my alley. So, and it's in the paranormal realm, so I can make it work. I ain't gonna bring no damn romance author on here because I can't make that work unless it's some kind of Bigfoot erotica or werewolf erotica or some shit, which I've had a couple of those on.
That's cool.
So,
So, all right, well,
folks,
thanks, man.
I've said it before. I'll say it again. You search Bigfoot erotica on fucking Amazon. Be prepared for a journey down a wormhole you never wanted to go down, but you're going to go down because you're going to be like, what the fuck is this? So, just saying. Everybody knows about werewolf and vampire erotica, but Bigfoot erotica exists. Women of the Woods. What can I say? Or I'm sorry, Bride of the Woods. Bride of the Woods. But folks, go check out JV's site, please. I'm begging you. It'll be in the description for all you listeners and for everybody else. Just his name's right there on top screen. Google it for fuck's sake. Jesus, don't be lazy.
Can't miss it.
I'm
Yeah.
right there too. So fuck, don't be lazy. And speaking of not being lazy, you fucks, you all know where to find me. If you don't, check the damn outro, you lazy shits, or read it on the bottom of the screen. I mean, come on. I say this for like 100 episodes now, and people still don't get it. But it is what it is. I want one more time. I'll thank JV for coming on because it's been a fun fucking show. And come back on, not tomorrow because I guess I had to reschedule, but come back on Friday for another amazing episode. And till then, have a good night, everybody, or at least try to. Those in the Northeast, yeah, we're getting snow.